It's Cardboard Time, episode number 105, and I'm your host, Arwen Kathke. On today's episode, I have a small game showcase featuring reviews of Casinopolis, a nice cup of Kaiser Cucumber and the Gangs of Mechanical Corners, Lemon Game, and Pizza Rolls. And also a interview with Greg Loring Albright. So a big episode today. I've been putting this off for quite a while. I was supposed to record over the weekend and didn't quite feel like it. And then it kind of snuck up on me today. And I'm recording this at 8:42 p.m. the night before. So if I'm kind of out of it, please forgive me. Things have just been crazy, as you all know. So I did finally get back from OrcaCon, had time to decompress a little bit, and did get next episode recorded already, which is fantastic, with my special guest for that episode. So I hope that you will enjoy it. But in the meantime, just recording this episode, unfortunately, very late. I should have just gone and done it at the same time, but it is what it is. Great time at OrcaCon. Let me just reiterate. I know that I said it on the podcast with OFPG, which was one of my favorites to record. But yeah, it's such a good vibe. And thanks to the Flat Out team for the hospitality and all sorts of other folks out there as well. Being in Seattle felt like I was at home. A lot of really good times, a lot of good memories I'll cherish for a long time to come. So a great trip, and hopefully maybe make it out there next year. We'll see. Well, let's talk about that shelf of aspiration, and it is down to 118. That is down below 120. That's down by 5. 5 incoming games. We have Hello Kitty Day at the Park, which I am very excited to play. I'm hoping that I get it played before next episode. Matches as well. This was one that I picked up at OrcaCon. It was a review copy. I did get to play it. I do want to play it a little bit more with a different rule set that is included in there before I give my final thoughts. Casinopolis and a nice cuppa came in from Button Shy. Those were review copies, and I will be talking about those today. Also got those played, so obviously. And Cascadia Jr. I did pick up while I was out at Proto CLE and picked that up. Haven't gotten that to the table yet, but hopefully very soon. I love the art on it. It's just so incredibly enjoyable and adorable as well. I think I was going to do a word like enjoyable or something like that. 10 games came to the table, Mutation being the first one. This one I have some thoughts on. Very good thoughts, by the way. I really, really enjoyed this one. I do want to play this with more than just the 2-player count before I do talk about it on the podcast. I would like to play this with 3 or 4. I feel like it'll really shine, but even at 2, it was quite a fun game. Torchlit is kind of the same thing. I played it at 3. I feel like it's going to be a better 4 or 5 player game. So I am looking forward to playing that, but definitely a different take on the trick-taking genre. BSG, Battlestar Galactica, got to the table while I was at OrcaCon, and let me talk about this for just a second. My play of Battlestar Galactica was at a table with all women, and I think that's one thing that was really special about OrcaCon was the fact that we got to sit down, all of us, everybody at the table was a woman, and I think that's really kind of special. It's something that you don't see a lot. especially when you're talking about a game like BSG. Like, all of us being there was incredible, and I had a great time. The game itself was almost ancillary to that experience as well. We were having such a great time, and yeah, my thoughts on BSG, I enjoyed it quite a bit. I feel like it's one of those games that leaves you with a lot of lasting stories, and I had fun with it. And definitely, probably, definitely. I'm sorry, I'm just out of it tonight. Something that I will keep around just for those story creation memories, but I do feel like there's better kind of hidden role games that are out there, but I did have a really good time with it. Starry Night Sky is a game that I got to play while I was out in Seattle, and I actually got to play it with Emma Larkins herself. She taught it to me. She was sitting there with it, and I asked if she wouldn't mind teaching it, and got to play that with her. And what a lovely little game. I do want to play some more of this, but I feel like it's pretty underrated and kind of flew under the radar for some people, and I really, really enjoyed it. If you are looking for something that's a little bit different, this is one to check out. Definitely look into Starry Night Sky. Herbaceous, I actually sat down and played. And I think I was at the table with Carla, and we were playing this. And Beth Sobel, who did the art for it, came over and said, "That artwork looks familiar," and got to hang out with Beth and play a game with her as well. Herbaceous was pretty good. I would like to play that again at more than two. I feel like it'll be a little bit better. I already talked about A Nice Cuppa and Casinopolis. We will talk about those on the show today, and matches will be upcoming. Canopy Evergreen is a game that I will be talking about on the next episode. I did get that to the table. And then finally, Wasteland Delivery Service came to the table. This one was also on my 5 games I need to play in 2025. So with that, 2 out of my 5 games for this year already knocked off the list at the beginning of February. So I feel pretty good about that. So I may wind up having to put a few more games on that list. We'll see how readily Weather Machine comes to the table, but I do have a lead on somebody who may want to play that with me. So Wasteland Delivery Service was definitely interesting. The theme was really good. I will say, playing it with 2, I felt like things were just kind of going better for me, especially with the dice rolls and that. It was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it, but at the same time, I don't necessarily know when I'm next going to get it to the table. So yeah, we'll see when it comes to that as well. So let's get into the reviews, so I can get done and get this uploaded, because we have a lot to get to. 5 reviews. These are maybe going to be a little bit smaller than my standard reviews, but I do want to talk about each of these games. So let's get into Casinopolis. This is from 1 to 4 players in 15 to 20 minutes, designed by Stephen Aramini, Danny Devine, and Paul Kluka. The art is by Philip Popovic, and it is published by Button Shy Games. Casinopolis is a standalone entry in the Sprawlopolis line of games, and plays similarly to the original with a few new twists. Place cards in an ever-expanding map to create large groups of casinos, line up jackpot icons along roads, and balance scoring from 3 unique goals. You'll need a little luck and a whole lot of skill to maximize your winnings. Casinopolis has 18 double-sided cards. One side shows the blocks that players use to expand their map, while the other side shows unique scoring conditions. 3 of these are randomly dealt at the start of the game to establish the 1, 2, and 3 chip bets for the game. The higher the bet, the more points that goal is worth at the end of the game. Players take turns adding a single card to the map. Cards must be added in a horizontal alignment. They can be placed next to or overlapping a previously placed card. Each card features 4 blocks split amongst the 3 different casino colors. Adjacent blocks that share a color form larger casinos. Blocks can include up to 2 roads on them. Each road costs points at the end of the game, though their impact can be lessened by connecting segments across multiple blocks to form a single road. The longest road at the end of the play is the strip, where the most important casinos can be found. Roads also include 1 or more of the 6 lucky symbols, which can pay off substantially at the end if lined up properly. Once all 15 cards have been played, the game ends and points are scored. Players gain 1 point per block from the largest casino of each type that is adjacent to the strip, then lose 1 point for each road. You evaluate your scoring goals, and you also score jackpots for each run of 3 or more matching lucky symbols that are adjacent to a shared road. Score 1 point per icon. Finally, the total is compared to the target number, which is the sum of the 3 numbers listed on each goal card. Score higher than that target number to win the game. So this was a review copy that was furnished by Buttonshy, so thank you very much to Buttonshy for the opportunity to take a look. I am a big Sprawlopolis fan. I love this series, so I was very excited to get this, and I would say there's a few major changes in this from the other Sprawlopolis games. The concept of the strip is definitely one of them, where you're scoring those highest color blocks of casinos along that longest road. The jackpot ability is also new, where you line up 3 or more symbols in a row on the road, and then you score extra points, so basically 1 point apiece for each one that's in line over 3. And then the change in point value for each goal, instead of being a fixed value, is now a variable value based on where you deal it out to. So I feel like the main priority in this was to focus on the 3-point goal and then secondarily focus on the 2-point goal, which kind of makes sense. You know, you want to score the most points and you want to focus on those goals that'll get done. I do feel like the 1 point per jackpot space, no matter how long it grew after 3 spaces kind of put together, did feel a little undervalued. That was one of the most fun things in this game, was lining up those jackpot values and seeing how you could arrange things and, you know, kind of making that trade-off of, do I want to ruin this goal, worth 3 points a piece, so I could be sacrificing 3, 6, 9 points to do this really fun thing. And oftentimes it wasn't worth it. It just didn't feel like that increase in jackpot really was worth it, because it was just 1 additional point, as opposed to, 2 or 3 points for every thing that you ruined that you couldn't then get off of one of your scoring cards. So I do feel like there was kind of a missed opportunity there almost. But yeah, I wish that had been a little bit more robust, and I don't know what the answer to that is. Maybe like a sliding scale, where if you get 3 in a row, it's like worth 1 point, but if you get like 6 in a row, it's worth 12 or something like that. And that may be an intentional choice. I'm not sure. I do feel like a lot of the scoring conditions I encountered in this were actually a lot more fun than your standard scoring conditions in Sprawlopolis. I did have a really good time with each of those goals, and I thought that they were very, very well done. I feel like that's kind of come through iteration after iteration after iteration of this game, that, these new goals are definitely like, hey, we got to make this super fun. So I definitely enjoyed those as well. From a color vision aspect, I had no issues with this game. The colors picked were good for me. And the symbols were also good to distinguish for your jackpots. So completely colorblind players may have some issues with this if you can't see colors at all. You do rely on some of those colors to figure out, those big sections for your casinos that you're trying to coordinate. So that is one thing for completely colorblind players they may want to watch out for. But other than that, I thought that was pretty well done. So for my final thoughts, I think if you love Sprawlopolis, you want all the expansions, and you want all the Sprawlopolis content that you can get, this is an absolute no-brainer to pick up. If you like Sprawlopolis and you're looking to kind of expand your horizons on it, I do feel like this is a good entry for the price. And I do prefer this over some of the expansions, Agropolis and Naturopolis and things like that. I do feel like this is, a little bit better than those. And I would say probably my second favorite in the series. Now, that said, I would still start with regular Sprawlopolis if you're new to the series. I do feel like this is worth checking out if you kind of decide, yeah, that this is my cup of tea. I want more. I would like, something kicked up a little bit more. This is definitely a good second game to pick up in the series. So this one's definitely staying in the collection. I'm interested to see what they do with it in the future, whether they're able to, incorporate this into the game like they've done with the other expansions. I'll be interested to find out how that works. So yeah, definitely staying in the collection. Excited to play this some more, especially with some other people. I did play this solo, and Casinopolis was a keeper for me. Speaking of keepers, a nice cuppa. This is one player in 15 minutes, designed by Scott Alms. The art is by Andrea Ivatek Vikai and published by Button Shy. When your worries start to pile up, it's important to focus on what really matters by concentrating on the soothing ritual of preparing a cup of tea. To start the game, first shuffle the 7 tea cards and place them in a line, focus side up, each with a random face-down worry card directly below it. On your turn, first flip over a single face-down worry, then in sequence from left to right, resolve each face-up worry. These force you to rearrange your tea cards in various ways, and you'll need to plan carefully to keep them from messing up your well-laid plans. After all worries have been resolved, flip each tea card above a face-up worry to its opposite face. This turns a focused tea card into a distracted one, and vice versa. Remove each face-up worry that's below a focused tea card. These worries have been addressed through the calming powers of tea and won't be dealt with again. Lastly, if you choose to, you may swap any 2 adjacent tea cards to get them in a better position for the next turn. After 8 turns, your tea is ready, whether you are or not. Score points for each tea card you have in the correct order, plus extra points for each tea card with its focus side showing. But beware that you'll lose points for each remaining worry. Tally up your total and check the score to see whether you're ready to face the rest of your day or need to cozy up with another cuppa. So this was also a review copy furnished by Button Shy. I've played a lot of Scott's solo games, so I wanted to check this out. That's why I requested it. And I don't think that this does a whole lot new from a mechanical standpoint, especially with Scott's other solo games. Trying to put cards in a particular order, you're trying to use potentially negative effects as a positive, so I have these worries that are going to rearrange this, so I'm going to keep this one up, I'm going to get rid of this one. This one that I kept up will actually help me reorganize these a little bit better. And yeah, I've seen that before in various forms, but I think where the real magic of this lies is the theming and the art, especially at a time like this. It really struck me. It was really needed with everything that's going on right now. So this really hit with me, and I think it might have been a little bit more than usual. But yeah, it definitely, it has a great vibe. It is much more relaxing than some of the other games in the series just through the theme alone. Um, and I will say that this is super easy to learn. The instructions are very straightforward. What you're doing on the cards are very clearly explained. The rule book is not obnoxiously long. It is super simple and very easy to pick up. And I think that this will be really good for those who are looking for a little bit more in the relaxing, kind of solo, mindful series of games. You have a Gentle Rain that kind of fits that. This is another one that I would definitely recommend in that vein. Yeah, I really, really enjoyed where this took me, and I wanted to play more of it. I didn't do great on my first turn. My second turn with it was really good, and I kept wanting to play. So, mixing some stuff in, it was just a very, very nice experience. That I've been able to get out when I've been feeling a little bit stressed, and being able to just go through that and get on with my day has been really good. And I'm very glad that this exists, even though I've kind of seen these things before in different forms in Scott's games. From a color vision perspective, the color and shading differences in the iconography and the artwork is supplemented through symbology as well. So again, with most Button Shy games, there's no issues. Very well done, and thank you for making sure that this game was color vision friendly. So for my final thoughts, like I said, I love this. If for nothing but the theme alone, I definitely recommend, if you do need something that's going to kind of calm you down with everything, this is one to check out. Especially with it being a small game, with it being something that you can fit in your pocket. If you just need a break from work, it's 15 minutes, super easy to set up, get through it, and then get on with your day. This one is definitely staying on my shelves. That is a nice cuppa. And let's get into something that's maybe a little bit more stressful and might make your friends hate you. This is Kaiser Cucumber and the Gangs of Mechanical Corners. This is from 1 to 4 players in 20 to 45 minutes, designed by Seppi Yoon. The art is by Mark Eberhardt, and it is published by Fight in a Box. A small box tile stacking game of masterminds and mayhem. Mechanical Corners is a city brimming not only with cogs and commerce, but secrets and secret societies. The masterminds run the city, entertaining themselves with hijinks and high society. The Royal Museum has just received a large donation of priceless art previously thought lost. Sergeant Bonnie and the Rabbit Police, aka the Bunny Bobbies, have been tasked with its protection. And let me tell you, trying to say all of that 3 times fast is definitely a endeavor. For sure. You are one of the masterminds. Your goal is to outmaneuver the rival masterminds and get the most points. On your turn, you can hide a criminal face down or drop them into the action face up, revealing who they are to your opponents. Players get points for the agent color they want to get a clean getaway when rival agents get caught, and for the other 2 colors having the most colors in the deck at the end of the game. The player with the most points at the end of 3 rounds wins. So this was a review copy that was furnished by Fight in a Box. I did get to play this at PAX Unplugged, and then some more after that with my review copy. This is a really fun game with very whimsical artwork and character design. And I'm going to bring this up again, in my final thoughts, but I think one of the things that really describes this game is unique. I play a lot of samey games, especially with playing a lot of Euros, a lot of engine builders. I see a lot of the same mechanisms come up over and over again. And I think one of the things that this does well is provide a very unique game experience. I can't think of anything else to compare this to, and that's an amazing thing. The fact that this is very, very unique. It is a thinky game. You have to figure out how to best make sure that your preferred characters are going to make it out unscathed, which is very difficult to do, while the others get captured or chase off. And then using the player abilities on the tiles makes for some very clever gameplay. So I'm going to put something down one turn and then make my opponents think that I'm doing something else. And then I'm going to rotate this tile to actually better suit my plans. So you can do some very, very clever stuff with it. I don't necessarily know if you're going to, figure all of that out on the first round, but by the end of the game, you start seeing those opportunities. And certainly after you play a full game of this, your second game is going to be much better. Your plays are going to be much smarter. And it's definitely something that kind of sinks in. That said, it's a very easy to teach rule set. You're going and placing something down, either face down or face up, doing the ability. And then if you want to reveal who your character is, you get to do their ability. There's not a huge amount of that rule set learning. It's just about how to, kind of combo everything together and make sure that what you're doing is kind of the right decision. This is a super compact footprint. While still having a good amount of gameplay, this did not take up a huge amount of real estate when I played it. So that was also very good if you're looking for something that's going to play in a relatively small area. The only thing is you're not sure how the board's going to expand out, but that's something that you can always move things around if you need to. I do really love the acrylic tiles of the Super Deluxe version. That is the one that I have. The feel of placing everything is awesome. The feel of the tiles in your hand is really awesome, and laying them down. It's just satisfying. I like acrylic tiles. They're fun to manipulate and play with. But it's not really obnoxious on size to carry around. It is a small pouch that you can throw in a backpack. The actual regular version, I think will serve people just fine that want to get it at the cheaper price. The gameplay is still going to wind up being the same. And that will fit wherever, purse, back pocket, wherever you feel like going with it. So it's really up to you what kind of experience that you want. This is going to Kickstarter. That is going to be up as of the posting of this. It's coming out that day, so that Tuesday. So if you're listening to this on release day, that Kickstarter is up. From a color vision perspective, there's no issues. Everything was handled through symbology and color as well. So really good job by Seppi and Fight in a Box to make sure that everything was very well handled from that aspect too. From my final thoughts, I really love this game, even at a 3 to 4 player count. Even though I'm a fan of Conquest Princess, I do feel like this is Seppi's best game to date, and perfect to share with other people. I bounced off a couple of his other games, but I do feel like this is a game that he has done a fantastic job with. I will say that those who aren't in the hobby might have a little bit harder time to kind of get around everything. But even the people who aren't in the hobby were picking this up towards the end of a play, and they wanted to play it again. And they were making some pretty clever moves in that second game. So I think that this is a game that you kind of have to play to get used to. And then once you do, you've got it, and you're having fun with your friends, even if they're not used to, playing games. I think especially with the design of the characters, I think that this is a really fun one to kind of bring out with some newer players, even though they're going to have a little bit tougher time. So it's a very unique addition to my collection. Like I said, it's not going anywhere. This game, basically fills a slot that I had no idea was in my collection. But now it's there. And, who knows what I'll be comparing the next game that comes along that does the same things, but it's probably going to be a while, and I'm okay with that because this does it extremely well. That is Kaiser Cucumber and the Gangs of Mechanical Corners. It is on Kickstarter today as of this episode launch. And let's talk about Lemon Game. This is from 2 to 4 players in 10 to 20 minutes. Designed by Tyler Villegas. The art is by Michael Villegas, and it is published by Spooky Ghost Games. Lemon Game is a competitive party game where your goal is to be the first to make the perfect pitcher of lemonade. 2 to 4 players will race to sculpt their hands while sabotaging other players and struggling against hazards. Begin your turn by resolving each hazard card in your hand. For each mold, discard a lemon card, and then do the same for sun and fly hazards. Holding on to hazards can be used to get excess ingredients out of your hand without using your actions. So that's a little pro tip. Take one action. This is where you can further manipulate your hand and those of your opponents. Actions include drawing, discarding, and swapping cards from your hand, your opponent's hand, or a set of available face-up cards called the stand. If an opponent has no hazards, it might be a good time to swap with them. At the end of your turn, you may draw 2 cards from the draw pile, but you do not have to. If at any time you have 3 of each ingredient and no other cards, reveal your hand to win. Remember, when life gives you lemons, play Lemon Game. So this was a review copy furnished by Spooky Ghost Games. This is definitely towards the lighter side of the spectrum when it comes to games, which I normally don't review. But I did get the chance to talk with Tyler at PAX Unplugged, and I decided to take a review copy to see what this was about. Again, with a lighter game, it's very easy to teach, very compact to play at dinner, snack time, waiting anywhere. And I think that the secret sauce in this really is the hazard cards and the fact that you have to have a perfect hand of cards. So you're trying to figure out how to get exactly 3 cards of a given type into your hand. And that is, you can kind of be clever with it. I think that in a lighter game, I'm not used to seeing that. And there's a little bit of push your luck as well, because you can try to take from the deck at the end, but if you get those hazard cards, you're going to have to start, basically discarding your cards that are your ingredients right at the beginning of your turn. So it is something, there is a little bit of push and pull with that. So I'm used to maybe having some of those mechanisms not in a lighter game. And I do feel like you can get creative and you can kind of take a little bit of agency through that. So I thought that was pretty unique. The take that here is definitely there, but it's not too bad. And I am someone who gravitates away from that in the games that have it, and I feel like it's easy enough to mitigate. So I felt like Tyler did a pretty good job with that. From a color vision perspective, there were no issues with the colors used. I will say, I'd probably add a little tiny icon onto the hazard cards to show what you get rid of. It's fairly self-explanatory, but it is something if you're having trouble with the colors, that's the only type of card that you might have a little bit of, an issue trying to figure out exactly what it forces you to discard. So that's probably my only suggestion with that. Again, this is a lighter game. This probably won't be a game that gets played by heavier gamers all that much. But I will say, if you have a lot of lighter gamers in your life, or non-gamers in your group that, you frequently go out with people, you want something to pull out other than your standard fare, this is a good option. It's a very cheap price point to pick up. I'm keeping it around in my purse for those, kind of impromptu after work or pub gaming sessions. The people that I feel are going to get behind this the most are those lighter gamers, are those gamers that, really haven't been exposed to all that much. And this is a great way of getting them into that while still having some mechanisms that make you feel clever, that make you feel like you're doing something, kind of fun. So again, it's not going to supplement or supplant like anything in your collection, like a, Flip 7 or something like that. That still kind of has been my go-to pocket game for the pub for a while. But this is definitely one that I'm going to keep around and have for those lighter gamers in my life. So good job to Tyler, and that is Lemon Game. And then finally, let's talk about Pizza Rolls, our last small game in the small game showcase. 2 to 6 players in 5 to 15 minutes. This is designed by Thomas Matthews and published by Pet Rock Games. Pizza Rolls is a 10-minute filler, in quotes, hidden rolls game, where your roll is what you want on your pizza, but you're too timid to say it. Play simulates a conversation about what kind of pizza to order, with each player vying for what they want while trying not to seem overbearing. 8 topping cards represent the game state. Gameplay consists mostly of moving these topping cards back and forth between the not on the pizza zone and the on the pizza zone. Each player is dealt a secret roll card showing their objectives in the game and a small hand of conversation cards they can play to manipulate the topping cards. Players take turns either playing a conversation card from their hand to change the toppings or choosing to pass. Players can always choose to pass, but the game will end as soon as the majority of players pass in succession. When the game ends, players reveal their secret rolls, and any toppings in the on the pizza zone will score. Points are totaled, and all players with a positive score are joint winners. Sometimes everybody wins. There's also a cooperative mode with slightly modified rules. Players must work together to make sure that everybody is happy with the pizza, because if a single player loses, all players lose. Luckily, players make 2 pizzas instead of 1 and only score using the best pizza for each roll. So this was a review copy furnished by Thomas, so thank you to Thomas for that. This was a very interesting filler that caught my eye at a designer conference in Cincinnati where Thomas was. I had a great time with it. I thought about it after the convention, which is always a really good sign. And then Thomas reached out, trying to figure out what to do for his campaign. And we chatted about it. And I said I would be more than happy to take, more of a look at it as well. So this is a super easy to teach game. It's a very graspable concept for people. I mean, I think we've all been there, that we are trying to argue about what to put on a pizza. And I will give Thomas credit for the fact that this is a very relatable experience. And I feel like the conversation cards really feel like what you're doing in real life. It's like, I don't want to be too pushy, but I'd really like pepperoni on here. Or I'd really like extra pineapple for some reason. Pineapple's good on pizza, by the way. I don't know what y'all are talking about, but it's good. Um, I do find that it's interesting that there's a little bit of push your luck. You only get 5 cards in your hand for the entire game. It does keep that game time down significantly, so it doesn't roll on indefinitely. Um, but the fact that you only have 5 cards adds a little bit of push your luck on when and how to play your cards because of that passing mechanic. And I felt like that was where this game got really interesting, in the fact that if the majority of players pass in a row, so you determine, if it's a 3-player game, if 2 players pass in a row, the game's over and you score. So determining when to play those pizza cards or the conversation cards rather, and when to get those out on the board and get your stuff over to one side or another, you could forcibly have somebody that wants a bunch of stuff on their side and then kind of move that back a little bit towards the end where your opponent might not have the ability to actually do anything about it. I thought was very fascinating. And I feel like that's what makes this game go from just being good to very, very good. And I really like the way that plays out. From a color vision perspective, there were no issues. Nothing is denoted through color. I will say from an overall vision perspective, on the back of your roll card is a very, very small reference text and roll checklist on the back of the roll cards. I'm very glad that it's there, especially for newer players. And you really shouldn't need the reference text after your first play. That said, the roll reference can be a little bit hard to see, especially if it's in dim lighting situations. Like if you're playing in a bar or a pub or, something that has low lighting, that may be a little bit of an issue depending on your role. Some of the roles actually require you to figure out who has what, and you're trying to either get them to score well or get them to score poorly. And trying to figure out who has what could be a little bit of a problem in that circumstance. But I'm glad that it's there. I can understand why, you would potentially not want that on a reference card, especially if that puts you over your production limit on cards. So it's kind of give and take. I'm glad that it's there, but that may be a problem for those who have vision issues. Other than that, I feel like this is a very, very well done game, and I had a lot of fun with it. So for my final thoughts, lots of range on this, from a game at the pub to a 4 to 5 game series. You'll play at a lighter game night, so you can get this out quickly, or it can be the thing that, hey, we just want to play a bunch of rounds of something really light. Let's get this out to the table. This is a game that I'm not only keeping around, but I'm also recommending that friends pick up for themselves, especially if they need something that's small box to carry around with them. I feel like, I'm hoping that this goes to Kickstarter and does well. The Kickstarter is up today. As of this recording, Pizza Rolls is spelled pizza, Roles. Roles as in like an acting role, not a actual role like a big good. So definitely check that out. This I was very happy to play, very happy to see come to fruition, and hope that it is very successful. I feel like this is a great little small box game, and can't recommend it highly enough. That is Pizza Rolls. Well, stay tuned, because coming up next, we have an interview with Greg Loring Albright. On today's interview segment, I have Greg Loring Albright. Greg is the co-designer of Block by Block Uprising and is the designer of Ahoy and the upcoming Keep the Faith. He is also an assistant professor of games, media, and culture at Harrisburg University. Greg, welcome to Cardboard Time.
Thanks so much for having me on. I'm glad to be here.
So we finally got to meet in person at PAX Unplugged. I did
Yes.
get to check out Keep the Faith a little bit. We did get to meet up, and why don't you kind of tell everybody a little bit more about your work and how you got into the hobby?
Totally, totally. So I'm never sure what to say about my work. Like I'm not that new of a designer, but I feel very new. I'm still like exploring what kinds of things I want to do. I've done Ahoy, which is like a very sort of mainstream, asymmetric game with leader. I TL invited me to join Block by Block, which is a very like aggressively political game. Keep the Faith is a game about religion. So I don't know. I don't know what to say about my work and how I got into the hobby. I've told a couple of places a story about my friend Andy in Chicago, which is true. But another thing that got me into the hobby, aside from this friend who was like, check out hobby board games, was that I worked at a Mennonite summer camp. I grew up in a Mennonite family,
Oh, wow.
and on the weekends, when it was like a weekly camp, right? So we'd get like a bunch of kids in on Sunday, and they'd go home on Friday, and then Saturday and half the day Sunday we'd have off. And so me and all these other camp counselors would be hanging out in this like open-sided pavilion in the middle of the woods, and they taught me Catan and Ticket to Ride, and I was like, ooh, this is cool. In addition to like Rook and Hearts, and like Mennonites love their card games, which is weird because they hate gambling. So
That is very fascinating. Rook is one that I have down on my shelf of aspiration actually, and it's been there for years and I still haven't been able to play it.
yeah, it's one of those games. It's very much like like a lot of trick takers. It's sort of like it's one of those like forever games that you just like. Oh yeah, the old Mennonite grandparents will get it out and play it and have for the past 40 years, and they're deep in the scene and they know all the strategies and whatever.
They've been playing it for years. Block by Block Uprising is another one that I definitely want to take a look at. When I was doing my research for the episode, it does seem like a really unique and very interesting game. So I'm interested to try to find a copy of that and track it down and play it at some
Nice.
point for sure.
I'll talk to TL and see if he might have some in his closet he can send you. I am very much like not like done with that. I'm not like I'm over block by block, but like I'm not the publisher, right? TL Simons, who's the co-designer, he designed the first edition and runs Outlandish Games, the publisher. He's in charge of all that stuff. But totally. And his most recent game, he did a game with Henry Audubon called Defenders of the Wild. That's also super cool.
That's very cool. I love that. So, your upcoming game is called Keep the Faith. Can you tell the audience a little bit more about that?
Yes, totally. So Keep the Faith is a storytelling game about a religion in transition. So if you ever played like Fog of Love or For the Queen or even like The Quiet Year, right? These are games that are sort of like they're in the RPG space, but they're not like it's not like I got a character sheet and I roll dice. You're instead of telling a story about a person or a group of people, you're telling a story about a religion. And so every round, 100 years pass. And so over the game, you play out 500 years of religious history through shared group storytelling, right? There's cards, there's a few tokens, and these kind of shape what you can talk about. But it's very open ended. It's very much like you talk, you say what happened, other people build on it. And so you build up these layers of meaning and tradition over time as you play the game.
And I mean, even in the short amount of time that we had with the game, you could already see some narratives emerging and, some stories emerging, which I thought was very interesting. And this is a game type that honestly I'm not terribly familiar with. And it's one that my fiance is a little bit more familiar with than me. So I'm kind of delving into it a little bit more. And I
Nice.
think it is a very kind of interesting way for people to explore some of these concepts because religion is kind of one of those things that, it's kind of hard to talk about, but I think that this brings it up in an interesting way. So, can you, kind of go into your thoughts on why it's important for people to explore some of these concepts?
Yeah, totally, totally. Although, first, real quick, I just want to say, like, you are kind of the target market for the game in that I wanted to make a game that board gamers, people who are like familiar with hobby gaming but don't play a lot of RPGs, could dig into, right? Because that's where I was at the start of this design project. I was like, oh, these games are so intriguing. There's so many cool indie RPGs out there. And as a board game player and designer, they felt so foreign to me. And I was like, how can I like cross this bridge myself and help other people cross it? So part of the design brief for this game was like design a game that board gamers can get down with even if they don't play a lot of RPGs. But to the question you actually asked, yeah, it's religion is such a like weird and important and hard to talk about thing for a ton of like historical reasons, right? But I think right now it's super important, right? Like those of us, from the left, right? Like historically, leftism has been very anti-religious or a-religious, where it's like this is bad or we can't talk about this, right? And that's hard because religion is important to a lot of people, and if we're going to bring them around to our point of view, we have to understand that it's important and not just be like religion is the opiate of the masses. Shut up, right? Like nobody, no, that's not a good take, right?
Hmm.
And so that's sort of like the nice take, right? Of like religion is important and we need to understand it, whether or not we are on board with it. And then the less nice take, which is some of the reading I did for this game, was from people who were basically making this point and other more interesting points. But like religion is guiding the people who are in power right now in the U.S. and in a lot of the world, and that's bad, right? And
Hmm.
and if we're that's just like a stated fact, right? But if we're going to understand their motives and how to counteract them, we have to understand what's guiding them and their takes on this religion.
Yeah, and I think you've had your own personal journey with religion and that in your past as well.
Yeah,
So
totally, totally.
how has that kind of guided your design of the game?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like designing this game has been sort of like concomitant with my changing personal perspectives on religion. So I grew up, as I said, Mennonite. My Mennonitism is weird. It's like it's very ethnic, right? It's like, okay, you're when Mennonites meet, one of the things they do is play the Mennonite game, which is you say, "Oh, what's your last name?" "Oh, what was your mom's last name?" "Oh, I have a cousin who has that last name." Does your mom know my cousin? And my family joined a church that became a Mennonite church when I was 7, right? So I am not ethnically Mennonite.
Mm.
So I'm sort of an outsider in that way. But navigating that sort of like journey away from this Mennonite church I was in was very like conservative Christian. We like read the Left Behind books. We listened to CCM. All these sort of like cultural touch points that like evangelicals and ex-evangelicals are all like nodding their heads right now, like, oh yeah, I get it. So moving away from that kind of religion has happened for me as a part of designing this game and sort of like thinking through these things that I was taught growing up, like, oh yeah, God made it this way, right? Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve, right? This like homophobic rhyming truism, and part of the game is to like get you to interrogate those, to say like, oh well, in the game we ended up believing that red hats are bad. Oh, that's a too loaded example. We ended up believing that like broccoli is bad, and 100 years ago that was just because the broccoli farmers were our enemies, and
Hmm.
now 300 years later we know that broccoli is bad because God says broccoli is bad, right? And
Hmm.
like watching that process happen, watching these things kind of arise and fall, and learning to interrogate where the cracks are in a belief system was part of what helped me in this journey. So I'm hoping I can help other people too.
Yeah, and again, we only really had like one round with it, so I only got to see a small part of the game, but I could already kind of see that narrative kind of happening and those wheels that I kind of had to turn myself in order to try to, extend that narrative. So I thought that it was really cool, some of the things that you were touching on in it, and I think that it's really going to be something that is going to be interesting to a lot of tabletop gamers and something that people can explore, like you said, that aren't necessarily familiar with the medium and can get to see something a little bit different.
Yeah, and I also want to say, like, I realized what I said sounded kind of like I'm trying to deconvert everyone, right? And like that's not it, right? Like if
Hmm.
you are listening to this and you are a religious person, like this game is also for you, right? It's not hostile to religions. It takes religion seriously, and if you're a religious person, hopefully you do that too.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. So, to pivot a little bit, you've also done some work in designing live action and puzzle games for different colleges, museums, and parks. Anything that our audience might have heard of?
I love this question because it means you did your research. Because
Yeah.
I haven't done these in a while, and I don't talk about them a lot. But I haven't done them in a while, basically due to being concerned about liability issues. I ran this game just sort of like on my own, not for any client. Just sort of like I would put it up on Groupon, and people would come and play this like spy themed kind of social deduction game in a park in Philadelphia. And as a result of that game, somebody almost ran into traffic because they were playing so hard.
Oh,
They really wanted to get away, and like everybody was fine and safe. But I was like, I'm motivating people to do things that are not safe, so I shouldn't do that anymore. But I've designed games to. I designed a game to be played in the Art Institute of Chicago. It's not like they didn't like hire me. We just kind of played it guerrilla style inside their museum. And then I've been hired by Haverford and Swarthmore colleges, and I actually was hired by ReadPop, the company that runs PAX Unplugged. The first 2 years that they ran PAX Unplugged in Philly, they didn't know if anybody was going to come, and so they had like a big marketing spend, and as part of that, they commissioned me to make 2 years in a row like an ARG sort of like mystery game that the winners would get free tickets to PAX Unplugged.
oh wow. That's really
Yeah,
cool.
it was great. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think I came into PAX Unplugged a little bit late to know about that, but that's something I'll probably go back and take a look at because that's really, really fascinating.
I don't actually know how much of it is documented. So if you find anything
Oh,
about it, please let me know. It was very ephemeral. I paid my grad school friend to like dress up as a member of one of the factions and like meet people at a brewery and give them an envelope, and it was fun, but it was very like it happened and then it was gone.
that's super cool. No, and definitely don't want to, encourage people in Philadelphia to run into traffic. I mean,
No,
there's a
please.
ton of it there. I was I was actually walking down the road with Roberta Taylor. We were going from, one place to another, and she goes, "The traffic in this city is crazy." Because I believe she's from Edmonton, and she's like, I don't have a car, I just go and, use public transportation, and it's great, and the city has great public transport, and I would never drive in this.
Yeah, no, Philly's a great public transport town. When I lived there, my partner and I shared one car, but we almost never used it. But yeah, Philly has an energy. It has an attitude. I was walking on the street with my colleagues. I was there with some work folks, and we like got into an intersection, and someone like looked like they were going to turn and almost hit us in the intersection. And I just like immediately just like flipped them off. And my co-professor was like, "Greg, what are you doing? Like you're not like that." I was like, "Man, Philly just brings it out of me. You
Yeah.
got to be ready to go in Philly."
It is quite the city. I will say that I always enjoy my time down there.
I
And
love it. It's one of my favorite places in the world.
yeah, it really is great food, and the scenery's always awesome, especially around PAX time where you have the
Totally.
Christmas market and that. So, yeah, Philly's very cool. I do want to talk a minute about the First Nations of Catan. It's a alternate rule set to what is many people's first foray into the hobby. It wasn't mine, but I know a lot of people that got into board gaming because of Catan. And basically players are going to take on the role of First Nations players battling against the settling forces. So what inspired you to create that?
Yeah, this game, Catan was like one of my entry points into the hobby, and I like didn't feel weird about it at first. And then at some point, somebody was like, "Hey, you don't play Catan?" And I was like, "Ooh, I feel weird about it." And specifically, right, the weirdness being around like the word settler in the title, right, which is no
Hmm.
longer in the title. Good move, Mayfair or whoever owns that now. But right, and how that is sort of bound up in the terra nullius myth that undergirds the American founding, right? That like, oh, we being white Europeans showed up in this empty land and God gave it to us, and so we just get to settle it. And of course, this is an erasure of the indigenous people who lived here and the genocide that was undertaken to take over the land, right? And so people who play First Nations of Catan or read it or hear about it, some of them are like, yeah, but Catan's not about that. And I'm like, yes, true, you're right, right? Like it was made by a German person he's been on the record being like, oh, it was about like the settling of Iceland, right? Which where there were no people there. But context matters, right? And like
Hmm.
the audience of a work of art is important. And so when you play the settlers of Catan in the US, you can't not think about the settlers of the US, right? And
Yeah.
so this game was sort of my attempt to like intervene in that dynamic, right? Not like people are always like, oh, Greg says you shouldn't play Catan, it's evil and problematic, right? There's a National Review piece about like board games are going woke from
Oh,
2017. So they
geez.
didn't probably didn't use the word woke back then, but
Hmm.
they were like, this guy wants to cancel Catan. But anyway, I don't, right? Like part of what I say in the piece, it's a very like personal reflection, is like I wanted to play Catan more without feeling weird about it, and
Hmm.
so I created this mod where basically in the mod, one player becomes the indigenous people, and everyone else still plays Settlers of Catan. but there's this asymmetry and there's this sort of ability of the indigenous to fight back and resist and not be erased. And some native scholars have actually written, not really in reaction to this piece, but have cited it and been like, okay, Greg is a white guy and he's trying and he's doing a good job. There's some problematic things about what he did too, but they've been very kind to me, these other scholars, in citing me, and they haven't like, hit me with like the academic shade throwing that you can do. So it was an early attempt at like political design for me. I still like it. I still stand by it, but it's like saying, what's the solution? Play the indigenous as a person who's not indigenous, like, does have its own problematic dynamics too.
Mm-hmm. Well, for those who are interested in it, it is downloadable. It is a rule set that you can play with your standard set. You can go online and search for it, and you will find a sheet with all the rules on it. So,
shouts out to the journal, the Analog Game Studies Journal, which published it, which is one of my favorite academic outlets. It's
very
free
cool.
and open access.
So, do you have any hobbies other than games?
Oh, so many. When I saw this question on your list, I was like, what am I going to talk about?
Everything.
I'll say a bunch, and then whatever ones you want to. So I love reading fiction. I home roast coffee. I used to work in the coffee industry. I fool around with guitar and banjo, and I play drums. I love hiking and backpacking, and I have 2 kids and a dog.
So let's start with the dog.
Yes.
What's your dog's name?
I have a dog. She's a pit boxer mix, and her name is Joan Jett. That was her name at the shelter, and we thought that was too cool of a name to change it to anything else. So
isn't that almost always the way though? Like they get the name in the shelter, and you can't.
It's just who she is. Calling her anything else would be a crime.
Yeah, we got Charlie from a shelter. We picked him up, and he looked like Falcor from the Neverending Story. And like if Charlie hadn't been such a good fit for him, his name would have been Falcor. Absolutely.
That's his middle name.
Yeah, Charlie Falcor Bassett Cathke. Now, home roasting coffee, I feel like this is something that maybe Rodney Smith has gotten into lately.
Yeah, he's been into espresso recently, right?
Yeah.
Which is like the one part of coffee prep that I actually don't do at home. So before I started my PhD and got into academia, I worked in the specialty coffee scene, mostly in Chicago. And one of my jobs was to, like, as an equipment tech and a trainer. So I would install espresso machines and then teach people how to use them. And so through that process, I've become incredibly spoiled and snobby and picky about espresso. And so I couldn't have an espresso machine in my house because I would spend like, an hour getting the shots just right, which is like totally defensible when you're working as a barista and you're going to serve 300 shots of that espresso. But I would spend an hour and, a pound of coffee getting it right for one shot for the morning. And that's not defensible. So my sort of like I still want to do coffee stuff was I'll learn how to home roast. So I have a roasting machine in my basement. I bulk buy green coffee with a friend of mine, and we get these like 65-pound bags of coffee shipped in and roast them and talk about them.
Have you had any interaction back and forth with Rodney on that? Given him any tips, from like, don't use an entire bag of coffee for 1 cup of espresso?
No, I saw his thread on Blue Sky where he was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm doing it! I got the espresso machine." I don't know if he and I have ever corresponded. I think we like know who each other are. But Travis D. Hill, the RPG and card game designer, was commenting on that thread, and he's a big coffee head as well. And he and I have chatted about coffee stuff. So yeah, there's good coffee energy in the board game scene. I think this makes sense, right? We like to use our brains, so we need to turn our brains on. So we use the chemical that turns your brains on.
I'm a Tim Hortons girl myself.
No shame.
I just, there's something about it. I grew up with it, so I have to represent.
That's awesome. I actually don't know if I've ever had Tim Hortons. I've traveled in Canada, but I don't know if I've ever had Tim Hortons coffee.
It's hard to avoid if you've been in Canada. Like there's a lot of different locations.
I guess actually the only time I've been in Canada was for a professional coffee event. So I was not going to Tim Hortons because I was surrounded by people who were carrying coffee and coffee preparing equipment. And so we would just make our own coffee on the road.
Yeah, so you didn't need it.
No.
So is anything on your table other than your designs?
Yeah, I don't play a lot of things. I always hear about people playing all these new games. I was listening to your episode with Olivia about all the stuff you played this year, and I was so jealous because I don't get to play as many games as I want. But there was an overlap. You had mentioned you had just gotten to play PAX Pamir for the first time. I
So
love
good.
Pax Premier, one of my
So good.
favorites. I just yesterday I played a synchronous online game on BGA with some friends. But that game, I mean, the game design is great, right? But like the product design of that game is just like top tier. Like you got to just touch the big clay army pieces and the fabric map. So I play Pax Premier whenever I can. Some friends came over the other day with Art Society by Mighty Boards, which is like
Oh yeah.
an auction game with a Tetris tile placement. I had never heard of it. They were like, "We got this for Christmas." It was cool. It was fun.
Hmm.
All the tiles are like riffs on famous paintings, and those are funny to watch. And then the other thing, my partner and I play a decent amount of Netrunner at home. So if we have time, if the kids are asleep, or if the kids are asleep at night and we are not too tired, we'll pull out some Netrunner decks and play.
That is one thing that I never really got into was Netrunner, and I heard a lot of very good things about it.
It's so good, and like I don't have the head or the time to like get into a competitive scene and like understand the meta, right? So
Mm-hmm.
the fact that my partner and my one really good friend who I see like twice a year, they both want to play and they like playing games with me, and so we have like this incredibly constrained meta. So I don't have to understand like what's on the block list, what are the cool combos that all the tournament winners. I just put together a deck and I play it with people who I love, and that's great. That's all I want to do.
I think that's what gaming is all about, isn't it?
Truly,
Or
truly,
supposed to be.
absolutely.
Did you find anything at PAX that you wanted to take home?
Yes, I didn't buy a lot. I was at PAX for work mostly, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I'm a professor and I teach. So that's the other thing I'd played before the Christmas break. I played a bunch of my students' games because I was there with three students who had all designed tabletop games, and so we were playtesting their games every week in class, and then they put them on the table in the Unpub room at PAX Unplugged. So most of my time was kind of like networking for myself and for them. But I did buy. What did I buy? I bought a Border Riding, which is this like pamphlet. Do I have it? I want to show it to you, even though it's an audio medium. I can't see it. Anyway, it's like a roadmap. Imagine like a giant like AAA roadmap,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a game about. It actually has some things in common with my religion game, which is part of why I wanted to keep the faith, because it's about like a village, and so you set up the history of the village. You set up sort of like insiders and outsiders and where the boundaries are, and then you evolve the village through like thousands of years, and where you've put those boundaries and those in groups and those out groups sort of like creates feuds and fractures and conflict, and
Oh
it sounds
wow.
really cool, and the form factor is just incredible. It looks like a little brochure and then it folds out into this giant map.
Oh wow. That's so cool.
Yeah, yeah,
I think that's one of the things I really like about the hobby is the fact that you just see these things every once in a while. You go to a convention and you see something that somebody has, designed, whether it's a box or whether it's a board or whether it's components that just blows you away. And you're like, oh my goodness, why didn't I think of that?
yeah. The like material aspect of tabletop games, board and role playing, is like really intriguing to me right now. I got to play at PAX Unplugged. I got to play PAX Penning, which
Hmm.
is Matilda Simonson's sort of entry in the PAX series. And that game is also just like so invested in its materials. There's little chess pieces that are modeled on the Lewis chessmen from like 1200s, and your player screens have these like actual words that like Vikings inscribed on tombstones. I got chills just looking at the pieces for the game. It was so cool.
That's so amazing. That's one that I definitely want to play. I have heard great things about it. I think Daniel Winter had played it, and
He was
um,
in that game with me.
yep,
We played it
yep,
together.
that's right.
Yeah, we had a great time, and I like am doing the right thing for my wallet and not buying a copy, but I really want to.
But at least you got to try it, and you
It
know
was
that
so good to play, and it's
at
it's high on my list of, if I receive an unexpected windfall, I'm gonna email Matilda Simonson, because that's how she runs her business, which is awesome.
yeah, I absolutely love that. So it's been fantastic chatting. How can people reach you on socials and the internet in general?
Yes, the best place to find me on social media is on Blue Sky. Greg is on the go. Greg is Greg, not Gregg. So Greg is on the go.bluesky.social. I also have a website, gloringalbright.com. And at both those places, I have my mailing list pretty prominent, and that's where I'll be announcing Keep the Faith when it comes to BackerKit and goes into crowdfunding and stuff. And also, you can just say hey and chat with me about board gaming stuff.
And Blue Sky is such a wonderful, I want to say, addition to the social media landscape, but I think it's kind of been my bedrock for quite a while now,
The
almost.
entirety of the social media landscape.
Yeah,
I was
yeah,
there was a conversation, I forget if it was on Blue Sky or on Discord, about like platform capitalism and about like no company has our best interests at heart. And I was like, yeah, but Blue Sky's really good. And it was like Blue Sky could turn bad when the venture capitalists find it. I was like, you're right, but I don't want you to be right. But I'm enjoying Blue Sky while it lasts.
yeah. Don't give them any ideas. Just
That's right. Shh, erase this
it's not gonna
conversation from your
happen.
minds, everyone.
It's not gonna happen.
Blue Sky's gonna stay good forever.
All right. Well, Greg, thank you so much for joining me on this episode. And yeah, definitely check out Keep the Faith. It is a very unique game that I think a lot of people are going to be surprised at, just seeing something different and seeing something very unique come to the table that really makes you ask a lot of questions. I think it's really cool.
Thank you. It warms my heart to hear you say that, and thank you so much for having me on the show. I really appreciate it.
And I think that'll do it for us today. If you want to know more about Cardboard Time, you can always go to the website. The Instagram and Blue Sky is at Cardboard Time. Sorry about the lack of board gaming content, but I feel like y'all understand. The Discord is on the Tabletop Express server. You can always email me at cardboardtime@gmail.com or go to the website for an invite. And as always, thanks again for listening, and we'll see you around the table in 2 weeks for another episode of Cardboard Time.